The man you killed wasn't the target.
Bled. The man in Trauma Bay 4 wasn't a patient. He was a malfunctioning landmine. Ling Min snarled, a jagged sound through lungs filled with neurotoxin. 6 doctors had tried to touch him. All 6 were down. One with a shattered wrist, another thrown through a reinforced window. He sat upright on the gurney, a shredded charcoal suit clinging to 3 gut wounds, wielding a jagged IV stand like a trench blade. "Back off or I gut you." His voice cracked, ice cold and lethal. Security froze. The air tasted like ozone and impending violence. Then Mia Josh stepped into the line of fire. She didn't look at the blood pooling on the floor or the weapon aimed at her throat. She looked at the tiger head tattoo on his forearm, half hidden by crimson. Her heart didn't skip. It went to war. She leaned into his personal space, ignoring the steel pressing against her neck, and whispered 2 words buried in a classified grave 15 years ago. Tiger won. Ling Min's eyes didn't just soften, they shattered. The weapon hit the floor. The war was over. The nightmare was just beginning. Drop a tiger in the comments if your pulse is pounding. Hit like and subscribe to Dominus Tailies, because Ling Min has been guarding Mia's family from the shadows for a decade, and now the shadows are biting back. The room went graveyard silent. Ling Min's hand, rigid as iron a second ago, trembled. The jagged IV stand clattered against the linoleum, the sound echoing like a gunshot. He stared at Mia, his predatory gaze dissolving into raw, agonizing disbelief. "Medic 7, he wheezed, the neurotoxin clawing at his throat. "You have!" His eyes. Mia didn't flinch. She grabbed a pair of trauma shears, slicing through his blood-soaked shirt to reveal the true extent of the carnage. 3 deep punctures. The skin around them was turning a bruised, necrotic purple. "I'm not a ghost, Ling Min. I'm the nurse keeping you out of a body bag. Now lie back before your heart stops." Dr. Morrison surged forward, face flushed with indignation. "Nurse Josh, get away from him. He's a high-level security threat. We've called the police." "I said everyone out." Mia's voice cut through the room like a scalpel. She didn't look up, her hands already flying across a tray of vials. "He isn't a threat to me. He's my responsibility. If you want him to survive the next 10 minutes, leave, now." The authority in her tone was absolute, a soldier's daughter taking command. The team retreated, the heavy bay doors hissing shut. Ling Min's breathing was a ragged, wet rattle. He reached out, his bloodied fingers hovering near her arm. "Why?" he gasped. "Why save a monster?" Mia slammed a syringe into his IV line, her face a mask of disciplined steel. "Because my father died so you could live. I'm not letting his sacrifice bleed out on my floor." The monitors shrieked a rhythmic death march. Ling Min's pulse was a fatting ghost. Mia hammered at his chest, her vision narrowed to the surgical field when the bay doors hissed open. 2 men entered. They wore blue orderlies' uniforms, but their movements were too precise, their eyes too cold. One reached into a laundry bin, pulling out a suppressed submachine gun. "Target identified," the taller one grunted. Mia didn't scream. She grabbed a heavy metal surgical tray and hurled it. Scalpels and clamps flew like shrapnel, slicing the lead shooter's cheek. He flinched, his first burst of gunfire shattering a row of saline bags above Ling Min's head. Plastic exploded. Water and fake blood sprayed the room. "Get down!" Mia tackled the gurney, using the steel frame as a shield. Bullets chewed into the medical equipment. Sparking wires hissed. Mia reached into her supply cart, not for a bandage, but for a canister of pressurized oxygen. She kicked it toward the shooters and fired a flare gun from the emergency kit. The small explosion wasn't lethal, but the flash blinded them. "Now!" she hissed. While the hitman blinked back the light, Mia didn't run. She plunged a large-bore needle into Ling Min's chest, relieving the pressure from a collapsed lung. A hiss of air escaped. His eyes flew open. He grabbed her wrist, his grip bruising. "Gun," he rasped. "Heal first," she snapped back. She slammed the last of the atropine into his line just as the second shooter recovered. He leveled his weapon at her forehead. Mia locked eyes with the killer, her hand steady on the syringe. She was her father's daughter, and she wasn't done saving this life. The second shooter's finger tightened on the trigger, but a heavy thud echoed through the bay. Ling Min had lunged from the gurney, driving a surgical trolley into the assassin's knees with a roar of primal fury. The hitman tumbled. Before he could recover, security burst in, tackled the intruders, and dragged them out in a blur of shouts and heavy boots. Silence returned, heavy with the scent of antiseptic and cordite. Ling Min slumped back against the pillows, his face a ghostly mask of gray. He wasn't looking at his wounds, he was looking at Mia. With trembling fingers, he reached into the shredded lining of his suit jacket and pulled out a slim, leather-bound book, the Ghost Ledger. He tossed it onto the blood-stained sheets. "Open it," he rasped, his voice a jagged saw. Mia flipped the pages, her breath hitched. It wasn't a list of hits or drug deals. It was a meticulous record of her own life. Sophomore tuition, paid. Her mother's experimental cancer treatment, settled. The mortgage on their house that mysteriously vanished 5 years ago, liquidated. Every entry was dated, every cent accounted for, all signed with a single, stylized tiger stamp. "You did this," Mia whispered, the ledger trembling in her hands. "All these years we thought we were just lucky." "There is no luck in my world, Mia. Only debts," Ling Min coughed, a thin trail of red leaking from his lip. "Your father saved me when the world burned. I promised him you never feel the heat. You weren't just a project. You were the only clean thing I had left to protect." The moment of quiet shattered. Mia's phone vibrated violently against the stainless steel counter, the screen flashing an unknown number. She answered, her heart hammering against her ribs. Before she could speak, a voice like sandpaper on silk filled the line. "Nurse Josh, I hear you've been a very busy hero tonight." Mia's blood turned to ice. "Who is this?" "Commissioner Sela's Vane. I believe you're currently harboring a fugitive who belongs in my custody." A chime signaled an incoming message. Mia pulled the phone from her ear, her eyes widening. It was a photo. Her 14-year-old brother, Leo, was sitting on a cold wooden bench inside the 14th precinct. He looked small, confused, and utterly surrounded by armed officers. "Leo is with my men," Vane's voice returned, dripping with a terrifying, fatherly warmth. "For his own safety, of course. The city is dangerous tonight. There was an incident at your apartment. A fire." Such a tragedy. Mia gripped the edge of the gurney so hard her knuckles turned white. "You touch him and You'll what? Save me?" Vane laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "You have 60 minutes to deliver Ling Min to the abandoned shipyard on 4th Street. Bring the Ghost Ledger, too. If I see a single patrol car or a blue uniform that isn't mine, Leo doesn't leave the precinct. He becomes another unfortunate casualty of the Mafia war." The line went dead. Mia turned to Ling Min, her face a mask of absolute terror. The man who had been her family's silent protector for 15 years was now the target of the city's most powerful cop, and her brother was the collateral. Ling Min didn't wait for permission. He ripped the heart monitor leads off his chest, the sensors wailing a flatline that matched the sudden chill in Mia's soul. "We don't have an hour," he rasped, swinging his legs over the gurney. He moved with a brutal, localized focus, ignoring the blood seeping through his fresh bandages. "Vane doesn't negotiate. He harvests." They bypassed the main lobby, slipping through a basement loading dock into a blacked-out SUV. 10 minutes of high-speed erratic turns later, they slid into a nondescript dry-cleaning storefront. Behind a heavy industrial dryer lay a reinforced steel door. Ling Min punched a code, and the room hummed to life. Mia froze. This wasn't a closet, it was a war room. Floor-to-ceiling racks held tactical gear, suppressed rifles, and digital scanners pulsing with live police feeds. But it was the center table that broke her. Sprawled across it were maps of Chicago, pinned with photos of her. Mia at her graduation, Mia at the grocery store, Leo at soccer practice. Red lines traced every route they had ever taken, marked with exit points and cover positions. "You weren't just paying bills," Mia whispered, her voice trembling as she touched a photo of her father tucked into the corner of a logistics map. "You were staging a battlefield around us." "The world is a battlefield, Mia. I just made sure you were behind the high ground," Ling Min replied, checking the action on a sidearm. He tossed her a light, Kevlar-lined jacket. "Vane thinks he's the hunter. He's about to find out how deep the tiger's den goes. Gear up. We're going to get your brother." The door to the back office kicked open. Pops Josh stood there, but the slouching retiree Mia knew was gone. He was draped in an old olive-drab tactical vest, his hands steady as he loaded a high-capacity magazine. He looked at Ling Min, then at Mia's trembling hands. "Vane isn't just a corrupt cop, Mia," Pops growled, his voice a gravelly echo of a war she never knew. "He was our commanding officer in Seoul, the man who orchestrated the accident that took your father." Mia's world tilted. "You were there. You told me it was a training exercise gone wrong." "I lied to keep the rot from reaching you," Pop said, slamming the magazine into his pistol with a metallic snap. "Vane was selling intel to the highest bidder. Your father found out. He went to the brass, but Vane anticipated the move. He didn't just leave us behind enemy lines. Illegally, he called in a precision strike on our own position to erase the evidence. To erase us. Ling Min's jaw tightened, the scar on his brow pulsing. I was the asset Vane wanted dead most. Your father didn't just push me out of the blast zone, Mia. He stayed behind to jam the frequencies so Vane couldn't track the survivors. He bought our lives with his blood. Pop stepped into the light, his eyes hard as flint. Vane thinks he's a king because he buried the only witnesses. He doesn't realize that some ghosts don't stay dead. He's used the city's resources to hunt Ling Min for a decade to finish the job. Tonight, the hunt ends. The warehouse air felt like a tomb. Ling Min grabbed the leather-bound ghost ledger, his knuckles white against the dark skin. The ledger is the only currency Vane accepts, he rasped, checking the weight of a concealed blade in his sleeve. I give him the names, he gives us the boy. It's a clean trade. Mia stepped into his path, her eyes burning with a mix of fury and clinical calculation. It's not a trade, Ling Min. It's an execution. Look at the logistics. She slammed her hand onto the map of the shipyard. Vane is a commissioner. He doesn't leave witnesses who have seen his real face. The moment you hand over that book, he'll level that pier with every tactical unit at his disposal. You, me, and Leo will be collateral damage in a tragic Mafia bust. Ling Min's jaw tightened. I don't have another move. I'm a dead man walking anyway, Mia. The neurotoxin is already shutting down my kidneys. If I can buy Leo's life with my final 30 minutes, I'm taking that deal. No, Mia hissed, grabbing her medical bag and a tactical headset. We don't play by his rules. My father didn't die so you could commit suicide by cop 15 years later. Vane thinks he's the only one with an ace in the hole. He's forgotten that Medic 7 didn't just teach you how to fight. He taught you how to survive an ambush. She looked at Pops, who was checking the feed on a long-range drone. We're going to that shipyard. But we aren't bringing a ledger. We're bringing a reckoning. The shipyard was a graveyard of rusted iron and freezing fog. Mia and Ling Min walked down the center of the pier, their shadows stretching long under the flicker of dying halogen lights. At the end of the dock stood Commissioner Silas Vane, flanked by 6 men in tactical gear. He held Leo by the collar, a smirk playing on his thin lips. The tiger and the nurse, Vane projected, his voice echoing off the shipping containers. How touching. Drop the ledger and step away. Ling Min held up the leather book, his hand steady despite the poison ravaging his nerves. Let the boy go first, Silas. This ends with us. Vane laughed, a dry, hollow sound that chilled Mia to the bone. You still don't get it. There is no us. There is only the narrative I write, just like in Soul. He leaned down, whispering loud enough for Mia to hear. Your father wasn't a hero, Mia. He was a fool. He had a chance to walk away with $1 million, but he chose duty instead. I didn't just kill him, I erased him. I made sure the world remembered him as a deserter until I needed a new story. Mia's heart hammered against her ribs, her fingers twitching near her medical kit. Vane stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with a sadistic triumph. He died for nothing, and tonight you'll join him in a shallow grave, labeled as Mafia associates. The city will cheer when I announce I've cleared the rot. He signaled his men, weapons leveled. The trap was sprung. The world blurred into a nightmare of cold steel and salt water. Vane didn't waste a bullet. With a cruel jerk of his chin, his men slammed the heavy iron doors of the shipping container shut, plunging Mia and Ling Min into a suffocating, pitch-black tomb. The sound of metal grinding against metal shrieked as a crane lifted them, suspended for a heartbeat in the freezing night air, before a violent splash signaled their descent. They weren't just trapped, they were sinking. Mia! Ling Min's voice was a desperate rasp in the dark. Salt water began geysering through the floor vents, the freezing tide rising to their ankles in seconds. Their hands were zip-tied behind their backs, the plastic biting deep into their wrists with every struggle. Don't breathe too fast, Mia gasped, her boots filling with the icy harbor. She kicked against a crate, her medical training screaming that hypothermia would set in before the oxygen ran out. The container groaned under the immense pressure of the lake, the walls bowing inward. The water reached their waists. It was a cold, dark weight dragging the air out of their lungs. I can't! Reach my blade, Ling Min wheezed, the neurotoxin and the cold finally winning. He slumped into the rising tide. Mia lunged forward, catching his head before he submerged. Stay with me, Tiger One! She screamed over the roar of the incoming flood. The water hit their chests. The darkness was absolute. They were 30 feet down, locked in a steel coffin with the only man who could save them acting as a literal anchor. The ceiling was the only thing left dry, and it was disappearing fast. The water had reached Mia's chin, a freezing shroud of black death. Suddenly, the container jerked. A massive, muffled explosion rocked the hull, and the door seals buckled outward. Someone had attached thermal charges. The iron doors were ripped away by an external winch, and the sudden pressure change sucked the water out in a violent surge. Mia and Ling Min tumbled onto the concrete pier, gasping for air, their lungs burning with the sudden intake of oxygen. Above them, Commissioner Vane stood frozen, his handgun leveled at the exiting silhouettes. He opened his mouth to order his men to fire, but a tiny, pulsing crimson light stopped him cold. A red laser dot danced across his forehead, then settled directly over his heart. "Movement, and you're a memory, Silas," a voice crackled over the shipyard's emergency intercom. It wasn't Pop's. It was deeper, raspy, and carried the weight of a man who had climbed out of hell itself. Vane's face drained of color. "Impossible. You died in the blast. I saw the coordinates hit." "You saw what I wanted you to see," the voice replied. From the dark rafters of the high-rise crane, a figure descended on a tactical rappelling line. He moved with the predatory grace of a veteran, his face partially obscured by a ballistic mask, but the eyes, Mia's eyes, were unmistakable. He landed softly between the victims and the killers, a high-caliber sniper rifle slung over his shoulder. He tapped his comms unit, the sound echoing through the foggy dock. "Medic 7 is back on the clock, and today I'm pulling the plug on your career, Commissioner." Mia stared at the man she had mourned for 15 years. Her father wasn't just a memory, he was the shadow that had been hunting the hunter all along. Vane didn't hesitate. "Kill them all!" he screamed, reaching for his sidearm. He never cleared leather. A high-velocity round from the crane took the gun right out of his hand, shattering the grip into plastic shrapnel. Before the tactical team could pivot, a series of pre-planted claymores along the perimeter detonated. A wall of orange fire and blinding white smoke roared upward, turning the pier into a hellscape. "Move, now!" Mia's father's voice thundered through the chaos. Mia grabbed Ling Min, hauling his semi-conscious frame upward. They moved through the heat, the smoke acting as their only cover. Vane's security detail was blind, firing wildly into the haze. Mia didn't run like a victim, she moved like a shadow. She snatched a dropped flashbang from the belt of a downed guard and rolled it toward the largest cluster of muzzle flashes. Crack boom. The disorientation gave them 10 seconds. Ling Min found his second wind, fueled by pure adrenaline and the sight of the man he'd thought was dead. He pulled a concealed submachine gun from a crate they passed, spray firing a suppressing burst that forced Vane's remaining men behind a rusted forklift. They reached the end of the dock just as a high-speed black rib boat roared out of the fog, piloted by Pops. "Get in! Get in!" he roared over the twin outboards. Mia shoved Ling Min onto the deck and dove in after him, bullets zipping through the air where her head had been a second before. As the boat floored it, the pier vanished into a ball of secondary explosions, leaving Vane screaming into the burning dark. They were out. They were alive. And for the first time in 15 years, the family was whole. The dawn didn't just break over Chicago. It felt like a healing. The news cycle was a tidal wave of justice. Headlines flashed across every digital billboard. Commissioner Vane indicted, human trafficking ring dismantled, the hero of Soul returns. Silas Vane sat in a high-security cell, his legacy incinerated by the very files Leo had decrypted and the testimony of a dead man. The ghost ledger was no longer a secret debt. It was the foundation of a new era. Mia stood on the rooftop of the Medic 7 Community Trauma Center, the morning wind whipping her hair. Beside her, Ling Min leaned against the railing. He looked human again. The gray pallor was gone, replaced by a steady, quiet strength. He wasn't a Mafia boss anymore. He was a partner in a mission that didn't involve shadows or blood. On her other side stood her father, his face scarred but his eyes clear, finally breathing air that wasn't heavy with the scent of gunpowder. "We spent 15 years running from a fire we didn't start," Mia whispered, her hand finding her father's calloused palm. "I thought being a nurse meant fixing the damage after the war. I didn't know I'd have to fight one to find peace." Ling Min looked out over the city he once ruled from the dark. "The war didn't break us, Mia, it forged us." Down below, the clinic doors opened. No guards, no encrypted codes, just people looking for help. The tiger, the medic, and the nurse. They weren't hiding anymore. They were home. The light wasn't just on them, it was coming from them. Thanks for watching this episode of Dominus Tales. We're building a library of cinematic stories just like this one. If you want to support the channel, hit the like button and subscribe to stay notified of our weekly releases. Don't forget to drop a comment with your theories on what happens next. Your engagement helps us keep the Tales alive.